this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. It's kind of interesting, the world that we live in and the spaces that we inhabit. Items within our homes or maybe our work environment become utilized for something other than what they may have been intended to be used for. Now, I'm thinking about places that I've gone as a death investigator where I've gone to a woodworker shop and a bandsaw, for instance, was used to dismember a body. Or maybe digging under the sink at a home and I find ant poisoning, and that same ant poisoning was used. Poison, strike that in 3, 2. And that same ant poison was used to kill a lady at the hands of her husband. Some things just seem kind of innocuous. For instance, I don't know about you guys, but I do like a good cold beverage every now and then. I like walking into my tiny little galley style kitchen. Kim and I live in a very small home. Popping up my refrigerator and getting my jug of water out, or iced tea, or maybe an adult beverage. You don't normally think of a refrigerator being used as a coffin. But today we are going to have that discussion because there is a case that originates out of New Jersey that caught the attention of both myself and my buddy Dave Mack. And we wanted to have, as the British say, a chin wag about it. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I've currently got a refrigerator that I don't like. I will not mention the brand name because it came with the house when we purchased the house several years ago. But to say that it is less than superior equipment would be an insult to other types of equipment. I don't know that the ice maker has ever accurately worked. And every time you open the actual door for the freezer, ice falls out, it goes out from time to time. It throws those codes up, the little weird codes that I don't have an owner's manual for it.
Joe, when you have a refrigerator that has digital readout and computer stuff, at some point in time you go, where's the cold button? I need my ice over here. I need my milk over here. We're good. Yeah.
I don't need it to fix a drink for me. I don't need it to prepare dinner. I just want you to keep my stuff cold. Yeah. It's kind of like the theory that I have about so-called dishwashers. Dishwashers are not technically dishwashers. They're dish heater uppers and dish wetters. And other than that, it's kind of a sliding scale, I guess. But I've never encountered a really good dishwasher. I guess the best dishwasher is me, bending over the sink and using a scrub brush.
But if you are looking for something universal, appliance-wise, the size of an appliance, the refrigerator/freezer would be much easier to use as a homemade casket than the dishwasher would be, just because of the length. But anymore, with all the stories we have these days about people being hacked up, chopped up, and disposed of, I guess a dishwasher could work for that as well. But today, we have one of these stories that, as I was trying to build a timeline, Joe, there were a couple of issues that kept popping up, and I still haven't resolved some of them. But bottom line always being the bottom line, we have a woman named Laura Hughes, and Laura goes missing, and they start looking for her because she doesn't normally just disappear. Can't find her. Now we're talking September, October, November. Finally, December 22nd rolls around, and there's a man named John Tyrrell, and John is faced with a dilemma, Joe. He is in New Jersey, out in the woods, which is so weird when you think of New Jersey. I don't think of woods. I just don't. I think of cities and, pollution because of how the reputation of the state. But the state of New Jersey has a lot of beautiful area that
It does.
It's like the hidden
a lot of
gem.
gorgeous places that people don't think about.
Right. And John Tyrrell is out in the woods, and he stumbles upon an abandoned refrigerator in the middle of the Belle Plaine State Forest in Cape May, New Jersey. Now, he doesn't exactly know that it's a refrigerator. It is something that is the size of a refrigerator, but it's wrapped up, okay? It's got a blanket or something around it. It's got tied down with straps. I mean, something has been secured inside this refrigerator size thing. And, hey, man, you're in the woods by yourself. What are you going to do? You're going to look at it, right? You're going to look, see what's in there. Somebody ditched it out here.
Yeah.
So he opens it up and immediately calls police because of what he saw inside. And I'm thinking December 22nd in New Jersey, in the woods. It's going to be cold, right? The guy was breaking out in a sweat, Joe, when he saw what was inside that refrigerator. It appears to be our victim today. And we're talking about a woman who has been missing and apparently found, Laura Hughes. But Joe, you always tell me to think about the finder.
Yeah.
The finder in this case actually gets charged with obstruction.
Yeah.
Now, if you're an innocent finder of something in the middle of the woods and the police ask you, hey, let's see your phone for a minute, and you say, no, you can't look at my phone, which is exactly what happened. So John Tyrrell is the finder and the first person charged in this case. He won't turn his cell phone over to police.
You're going to jail.
Yeah, that's
it's
do
kind
not
of
pass
like,
go.
it's kind
do
of
not
like
collect $200.
Anybody out there that if they're trying to give you a field sobriety test and they refuse, you have attorneys that say, don't comply. Well,
Never.
You're right. You don't have to comply. You really don't. But guess what? You're going to get a free ride somewhere in bracelets.
Yeah.
And
that's one of those horrible things, Joe.
Yeah, it is. And they're going to do it. But you don't want to, in this case, they know that the man has found the body and they know that, let's just look at it. Okay. The cops know from the beginning that obviously this is not some kind of accidental event where she happened to fall into a refrigerator and it got, strapped down with these mechanical straps.
Kind of wrapped up.
And wrapped up.
Yeah, there's not a real innocent explanation for this, Joe.
Yeah, they know from Jump Street that they're dealing with a very highly suspicious death, and there's a high likelihood, even if you can't, which they couldn't, by the way, determine what the cause of death was. They know that they've probably got a homicide on their hands here. And if they allow this guy to bolt and they don't get that data from him immediately, it could be, lost forever and ever. And how many of these cases have we covered and Nancy's covered where the digital data nowadays in particular is going to be the tail of the tape in these cases where you can go back and say, okay, this guy, he's got an alibi. He was in this location. He's never been, I don't know, for instance, the home address of Laura, that, they've had no previous contact. There's no digital signature here that would indicate that they're texting back and forth. They don't even know, maybe they don't even know one another on social media, if this guy's even on social media. And look, I understand privacy. You don't want somebody digging around in your phone, and you don't know if you're going to get it back either. Right. They're going to give it to you, or they're going to hold it forever and ever, amen, as evidence. And we're so tied to these things. I got to tell you this on an aside. I just had to jump on my class. I was teaching Intro to Forensics, and it's a big class that I've got in there. And just today, even though I've said it over and over again, I looked out over the audience there, and I got kids that are texting while I'm lecturing. They've only got me for 55 minutes, and you can't put your phone down long enough to listen to what I have to say. And so it's these phones.
How do you deal with that? For real, how do you deal with that, Joe? I'm really curious as to that, because you're in college to learn.
Well, I could say you embarrass them, and you say, are you incapable of functioning without your phone? But there's a callous that's built up now at this point. They don't care. So, you could, I could take all the phones up, I guess, if I wanted to. I probably couldn't do that. I know that they do that like in high schools and things like that. You could say you're going to take points off. But that gets rather tedious after a while. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, my point is that, these phones are so much part and parcel of our lives. I'm not defending the guy, but just understand we live in an almost totally cashless society. So think about taking somebody's phone away nowadays. There are people that pay for their gas with their phone, people that pay for groceries, going out to restaurants, going to the doctor. You use your phone to pay with it. And I'm sure that there's some kind of digital driver's license that's out there as well. I don't know. Probably. I think I'd heard something about that, but we're almost completely moved away from anything that's analog at this point.
That's a great point. And I'm thinking right off the top of my head, a case you and I have covered on here and with Nancy, the case of Maddie Soto in Florida, because the first thing they did before charging her, Stephen Stearns, with her abduction and murder, they got his phone. And remember, the first thing he did was try to delete everything on it, but there was still enough on there that they were able to charge him based on his phone. Before they found her body, they knew, okay, we got him.
Yeah, multiple factory resets, I think.
Oh, yeah. I accidentally did a factory reset, which, by the way, you can't accidentally do. Just saying. But in this case, we got the finder, and I agree with you there. When it comes to a DUI and not doing the side of the road sobriety test, look, you're giving them evidence. Chances are, if you're taking the roadside sobriety test, I've never seen anybody pass that. They take you downtown and have you blow anyway. You can refuse the roadside. You cannot refuse the breathalyzer. If you refuse the breathalyzer, you immediately lose your license for a certain period of time, depending on the state you live in. But you can refuse the roadside and say, just take me down and let me blow. You don't get in trouble for that. But in this case, you're right. They ask for his phone and he says no. Now, we don't know what's on his phone, but I guarantee you a couple of things. If you deny the police your phone and you just found a dead body in the woods that has been wrapped up in inside of a refrigerator that is wrapped in a sleeping bag and a yoga mat, all that is rolled up trying to disguise this dead body inside of this refrigerator, and you deny them your phone, they're going to get your phone anyway. They're going to get a search warrant, and now you're not getting it back. So just laying it out there that maybe, I'm not trying to give criminals any kind of a hint, but for crying out loud, maybe we ought to become less of phone dependent, Well, because
that's a bridge too far at this point. I think
we passed
the
that
damage is done at this point.
Yeah.
But and so when we think about Laura's body out there in that abandoned, actually quite beautiful area of the state of New Jersey, near Cape May, we begin to think about what brought her to that location. How did she get there, and how did she get there being conveyed in a household appliance? David, I'm reminded right now of a conversation you and I were just having, I think this past week. Folks that don't know, Dave and I don't just show up and chat on tapings of body bags. We can't get enough of each other. We'll call and just chat, about life in general, and kids and grandkids and all those sorts of things, and things that we see in the news, obviously, and planning shows. But we were having a conversation the other day. I don't know if you remember this, but we were actually talking about the word coffin versus casket.
Yep. And when you said it at the beginning of the show, I thought, hey, he's got something up his sleeve with this.
Well, I got to tell you, they're saying that this refrigerator And I said as well, that the refrigerator is like a makeshift casket. And there is a significant difference between coffins and caskets. Anytime I think coffin, I think of, first off, vampires, because of the way they're shaped. I also think of perhaps something that has to do with a very formal funeral, because of the way coffins are shaped. They're actually 6-sided, and unlike a casket, which is rectangular, it's 4-sided, and when you look at a refrigerator. I guess you could say that that's more casket-like than it is coffin-like. I think one of my questions is that if she is found inside, this is Laura, by the way, if she is found inside of this refrigerator, I don't know about you, but how the heck did somebody manage this thing? Did they have a dolly that they could strap? I mean, I've moved refrigerators with dollies. You can rent them at U-Haul, if you're going to be going down the road and you want to take your appliances with you. And yeah, it can be a one-man job, but it's very cumbersome in order to facilitate that. Did the individual that put them in there, did they have a dolly or did they have help? Because you're not going to throw this thing up on your back. I guess you could in some way drag it, maybe, if you had carpet, if you could do it in a sequestered manner so that no one would see you do it. But in order to really take eyes off of this thing, anything that you're going to do, you're going to have to do it in privacy. Here's my big question. The refrigerator that she was found in, my question is, being the nerd that I am, I want to know if the refrigerator still worked. I want to know if you.
Come on, Joe.
No, really, I want to know. Well, and here's the reason. Here's my reason. This is
a
my
long
reason.
Extension cord, and they're in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, no. But let's just say, for instance, that she was killed and then placed into the refrigerator with the shelves removed, of course, and kept plugged in order to keep the body cool while the perpetrator is trying to decide what they're going to do. What's the disposition going to be here of her remains within I know that I'm going to use the refrigerator. Where am I going to dump this thing? There's a lot of logistics that go into refrigerators and bodies. All right. This is something that I guess it could be an item of convenience. You've got an extra refrigerator, on your property, laying around the house. Maybe it's out back. Maybe they went and singularly purchased a used refrigerator at a junk store for this purpose. Because you got to, you think about it, I guess out of all household items, a refrigerator and a deep freeze, which we've had a case involving a deep freeze. Remember the two women up in Oklahoma with the skid steer. You've got, that's the most, I don't know, casket-like item that you have in your home?
Probably. In this case, Joe, when the body is found inside the refrigerator in the woods on December 22nd, she had been missing for some time. As I mentioned earlier in the show, that we're not exactly sure the last time she was seen. There is a little bit of an issue as to the last time she was seen. And look, we're all mistaken from time to time. I could think I saw Joe yesterday down at the supermarket, and in reality, it was a week ago. I mean, that does happen. So it's a whole lot less of when she was last seen as to where the police go in their investigation. Because as soon as this is found, they couldn't identify her right at first. Let's just say that she was last seen in the middle of July. Just call it July 15th for the sake of argument. We are now in December. Yeah. And she has been inside this freezer for some time. Now, it's not, as you mentioned, this could have been a situation where she's in the freezer plugged in somebody's basement. And then, on December 21st, they decide, I'm getting rid of it and take it out in the woods and dump it. We don't believe that's the case. because the investigation led in a different way. But what are we talking about in terms of a body that's been in an enclosed environment, such as an old refrigerator with no power? Let's just say it was unplugged, and that is now wrapped and it's been left in the woods. What kind of condition is a body going to be in after 4 months
That's
or
an
5
excellent
months?
question, and I'm going to be a contrarian here and start with what if it was plugged up, and let's just start with that one little piece first. If in fact this were to happen, and we don't have an indication of this right now. Matter of fact, if anybody wants to see a really cool movie sometime, make sure that you check out the movie Bernie with Jack Black and Matthew McConaughey and Shirley MacLaine. It's based on a true story about a lady that was a true story in Texas where she was murdered and placed in a deep freeze and left in the deep freeze for a protracted period of time. Believe it or not, the movie is kind of a dark comedy, but it's a true story.
Matthew McConaughey's mother is in that movie. She was part of the story.
Yeah, she is, and it's fascinating. The story itself is just mind blowing, very Southern Gothic, if you will. But with the condition, let's just say that we have an individual that's placed into a refrigerator. A refrigerator is not sufficient enough to really retard the process of decomposition, because you can't get the thing cold enough in order to knock down the cellular degradation that's going on. It'll slow it, but it's not going to. It's not like, let's just say, like in the case I was just talking about with Bernie, the movie Bernie. If you place a body into a deep freeze, all right, where things, when you pull out a package of chicken or ground beef, it looks like you could, lay mortar to it and build a house out of it. That's how dense and frozen it is. It's not like that with a refrigerator, and everybody understands that. You go to the refrigerator, you open it up, you got a pack of hot dogs in there. They're going to be cold, but they're going to be soft, all right? It's not going to be frozen through. So if the perpetrator in this case, did in fact put her body in and leave it plugged in for a time, it would retard the process of decomposition, but it's not going to stop it. So you would be fighting against that when you're trying to make a determination. This is going to throw your timeline all off. If you get out there and she's been plugged in, unplugged, taken out there and dumped, and I don't even know that there is a mathematical formula that you could use in order to calculate this from a postmortem interval standpoint. There's too many variables in it. But I will say that her body, when she was found in that refrigerator, and they did open it, depended upon the position of the refrigerator, I can tell you this, what's going to come out of it. First off, you're going to have a considerable amount of what we refer to as purge fluid, decompositional fluid that will literally come pouring out. All right. Because you get these, this is something I've never talked about actually on body bags, but I'll go there now. You have, you see bodies that are decomposing and swollen, and that happens as a result of this internal gas buildup. It's primarily methane. I've actually seen a needle inserted into the decomposing remains of an individual, been down for a while. The needle's been inserted into their abdomen, and you strike a lighter, and a blue flame comes out of the open end of the needle because it's bleeding off methane, and it'll burn. Had a friend light a cigarette off of burning methane off of a dead body.
Kind of makes me want to ask you about some of your previous friendships,
I know, questionable at best. But you're going to get what are referred to as blebs on the body. Now, blebs, B-L-E-B-S, blebs are generally associated with COPD or emphysema. When you see a person with emphysematous lungs, they're going to have these bubbles on the surface of their lungs that actually look like, the things that the kids, well, I do too. If you get packing wrap that you like to pop. It looks like those little kind of blistered, and it contains air. In the case of decompositional blebs, it contains one of the nastiest substances known to man, and that's decompositional fluid. And that's as a result of the cellular breakdown. And it's the blister, some people call it decompositional blisters. They're actually these sacs that are containing what's left of the breakdown of the cells, and it's leaching out. And one of the worst things that happens is that these blisters erupt, and that fluid goes everywhere, and it's kind of a greenish black color. And it smells as awful as it sounds. So you would have a tremendous amount of that in the refrigerator. Now, would she potentially be skeletonized to some extent? Perhaps. There might be evidence of the fact that the soft tissue is so degraded that you're beginning to see some of the skeletal features, particularly in the fingers and around the chin. You'll get that presentation around the jaw, even on the forehead sometimes. The saving grace, though, is the fact that you're not really around any kind of scavengers, are you? Now, they can come, and it would not surprise me, Dave, and this is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Out in the woods like that, you can have something that's seeded in that location, that's been placed there, and that smell is so strong that you'll have raccoons and possums, dogs, they will be drawn to that, and they're going to be really frustrated because they can't get to it. It'll just be there, and it's emanating out. And I can just imagine animals circling that area. If you were really careful when you were working that scene, you would probably see remnants of animal activity around that area. Everything from paw prints to scat to hair. You might even get one of these animals that becomes territorial because the smell is ringing the dinner bell for them, and they'll get into a fight over it. But they can't get access to the body. You imagine how frustrating that would be for a wild animal. But the bodies are preserved. Now, you can sometimes, believe it or not, you will, if that seal, that rubber gasket seal, has been compromised anyway, you might actually get fly activity. Okay. Which is kind of fascinating when you think about flies getting into the refrigerator, but sometimes found with flies in particular that, where there's a will, there's a way. There's actually a species of fly. Now that we're talking about containers for bodies, there's actually a species of fly called coffin flies that burrow, and they get into coffins, and that's where the name comes from. And they'll go to work on embalmed bodies that have been preserved. So you've got all manner of things that are being thwarted, but you can't take anything off the table. But her remains would be physically preserved to the extent that they're not being ravaged by scavengers that are coming by. She's not being subjected to rain, perhaps. If there's any trace evidence on the body, if she is fully clothed, that has been preserved to a great degree. Now, it's going to be really disgusting for the people at the lab that get this clothing. I used to think about that as I would take clothing off of the dead, and you hang it up in a forensic. We have these clothes dryers and they're not like a tumble dryer. It kind of dehumidifies the air. You put them on hangers, and you hang them in this box. And if it's saturated with blood, decomp fluid, it'll dry, but it dries over a period of time, and it doesn't compromise the evidence so much. But I always felt sorry for the people down the row, coming out of the morgue, and they receive the stuff in their very clean clinical area that they have. It's coming up out of the dirty morgue, and it lands on their desk, and they have to work with this thing, and they spread this, a bit of clothing out, and they're having to lean over this thing and look through a magnifying lens or a special lighting and treat it in particular ways, and they're having to deal with this nasty piece of garment, and it's not easy work to participate in. But if you have a body inside of a refrigerator, a lot of that stuff is going to be preserved, so you got to bite your lip if you're a technician and sally on forth through this process, because it's therein that some of these big questions might be answered. Years ago, I was working with a pathologist, and we had several bodies that had been placed into a deep freeze, and the deep freeze was brought into the morgue. It was just, they didn't bother trying to remove the remains from the deep freeze. And so you've got 3 remains that are commingled inside of an old deep freeze, and they're brought in on the back of a flatbed truck and then wheeled into the morgue. And we had to go through the process of removing the remains. But I remember still to this day, us opening. It was tied down, not with straps, but it was tied with rope. I remember untying that rope and opening up that the lid on that thing, and the pathologist looking down, and him, this is a direct quote, what a filthy damn what a filthy damn jumbled mess is what he said. And he was absolutely right, because these bodies have been in there for so long, many of the parts had disarticulated, and so you've got them mixed up, and you've got skeletal remains that are twisted around in bits of clothing. And it's one thing, it's the beauty of it scientifically and investigatively is that you've got everything contained in one space. That's the upside. The downside is trying to fight through all of the issues with decomposition. And that extends, in this case, Dave, to the body. And I think probably one of the most basic things that we work on as death investigators.
You know, I was wondering, that's why I was really curious as to what kind of decomposition would take place in a sealed container over a period of time like that through the summer, fall, into the winter months in New Jersey. In this particular case, when they opened the refrigerator, found her body as they were trying to identify her. It took a couple of days, and they being law enforcement, they actually released information about tattoos on her body and jewelry, because you've got a person of indiscriminate age who has been found in a refrigerator out in the middle of the woods. And there are a lot of people missing in this country, sadly. And so it wasn't an easy one to say, hey, we've been missing this woman for the last couple of months. It wasn't even like that. They really didn't know. And so they put on television, they created the picture of it and put, here's what the tattoos look like. Here's the jewelry found with the body, if you know who this is. And that's how they were able to identify her. It took 2 days. But I'm really curious as to how all of this transpires in identifying not just the person, but you've got to know how they died, right? So that you can track it back to the actual suspect and what took place before the person ended up in the woods. Because it is a person. It's not just a junk pile in the woods. This is somebody's mother who has been just tossed like this.
Yeah, mother of 2, correct? Laura's a mother of 2. Yeah, yes. Two young girls. Well, first off, let's take it from this perspective. I know that there are people listening to this right now, and they're going to say, well, why don't you just run DNA? Well, you can run DNA, but what in the heck are you going to compare it to? Okay. Why don't you just do a dental chart? Okay. Let's do a dental chart. We've done the postmortem dental chart. Now, what are we going to compare it to? Do you see it leads to a dead end? Now, if there are police out there, police agencies that have a missing person that they're working on, you can go to the family and say, hey, we think this might be your loved one. Can we please get her antemortem dental records, from her, who's her dentist? And you issue a subpoena. By the way, most dentists, if you're dealing with one of their patients, I only remember a couple of times where we had to get a subpoena for a dentist. Most of the time, they're just the most obliging people, because they develop real relationships, obviously, with these folks. They've known them for years. But sometimes you don't have that. And the one thing that you can go with are tattoos and certainly jewelry. Now, in her case, I think any right thinking person would say, well, Morgan, you're going on about how decomposed she would be over this period of time. And she would be. Her skin by this time would be a black green color. It's not going to look like it did in life at all.
What? Wait a minute, Joe. I've never heard this before. I've never actually heard that. It's going to turn that kind of a color?
Yeah, it'll be a mixture of black, green. Every now and then you'll see a hue of dark blue in it. And I don't ask me, I can't explain it, but that's how the change generally happens. You'll also get these kind of spider web looking presentations that are called marbling. And marbling happens kind of early on. You see it in the face a lot. And marbling, if you just imagine a marble countertop. And you know how, and I don't know anything about them. I've never had a marble countertop. I just hear people talk about them. They've got those kind of distinct veins that run through them, that make up those unique patterns. And I think that a lot of people put a lot of stock in that sort of thing about the pattern of the marbling in it. You hear marbling when it comes to steak. It's really well marbled. When you think about decomposition, this marbling that takes place with the body, that's actually the blood setting up in the blood vessels. And so it decomposes within the vessels. The vessels are decomposing. And so you get this presentation of dark purple, a blue kind of purplish color of literally the vessels. You can see them, the outline of them running through the face. And interesting, I've actually seen this portrayed in horror movies. So people have seen pictures of the dead and they're trying to recreate like a zombie or something. You'll see, and I don't even know if the people that are creating it know what they're creating, but you see it a lot in decomposing bodies with marbling. But in Laura's case, she did obviously have tattoos and she had jewelry. You're not going to see, how can I describe this? Let's just say it was one of our loved ones. Okay. And you know that you've got a tattoo on the body. You don't want a picture of the tattoo placed with the news media and say, do you recognize this tattoo? You don't want the actual image of the decomposing body. So many times what will happen is that after it's cleaned up, and there's a very specific way we clean suspected tattooed areas, you try to do an artistic rendering of it. Well, it looks like this. It's an eagle, globe, and anchor. If you've got some Marine vet that has been found dead and decomposing, or, I don't know, the word mom with a heart. And that's unique to that individual. You would prefer to do an artist rendering of the tattoo and then clean up the jewelry. Most time it can be cleaned and actually take a picture of that. Because people, there's a tendency. I wear one piece of jewelry, and that's my wedding ring. I'm not a necklace guy, all right? I've never worn one with a big fertility horn hanging off of it or something, or an ankh. I've just never worn that sort of thing, and I don't wear a watch anymore. But I do wear my wedding ring. It never comes off my hand, and so that's a piece of jewelry that is unique to me. Okay. But if you have a lady who wears multiple bits of jewelry, now you just increase the percentage of getting her notified or identified. If she wears specific types of earrings, let's say just diamond studs, pearl studs, as opposed to something that hangs down. Or maybe she does wear stuff that hangs down. She's got, I don't know, it looks like dream catchers or something like that. She's got a necklace on that's got an initial on it or anything like that. Every bit of that makes it unique. Now, to get the tattoos in the morgue on decomposing bodies, one of the things that we'll do, and I may have mentioned this before, but, sue me. We actually take a scalpel blade and gently scrape across that top edge of the skin, and it's decomposing anyway. You can, without scraping it, you can kind of make it out. All right. But as you begin to scrape away what remains of the epidermis, the skin will literally begin to peel off of that, the epidermal level. And below in the dermis, which is where the ink has gone into, you can still actually appreciate the tattoo. Now, sometimes they'll be misshapen because the limb might be swollen or that area of the body might be swollen, but you can get a general idea, of what you're looking at here. And you take really good photos, and you have an artist or somebody that's really good nowadays at, digital imaging, and they create this thing, a facsimile of it. And you combine that with something unique like jewelry, and you got an ID, Dave.
That's an amazing breakthrough in this case because, Joe, once they were able to identify who this victim is, they were able to find their main suspect, because the one thing that was consistent with the life of Laura Hughes and her boyfriend, Christopher Blevins, contact with police for domestic violence. And so as soon as she was entered into the system, Laura Hughes, oh, wait a minute, we have an address. We've got police reports. So that's when they go and investigate. Christopher Blevins becomes an immediate suspect. He's nowhere to be found. They can't find him right away. So imagine this investigation. You find the body on December 22nd. 2 days later, Christmas Eve, the body is identified as a missing person now. She's been missing for months. Laura Hughes, rather. Christopher Blevins is her lover, boyfriend. When they go to his place, they find a blue ratchet strap similar to that was found wrapped around the refrigerator. They also find a gun. They also find a few other things in the apartment that tie him directly to the refrigerator found in the middle of the woods. So they're looking for Christopher Blevins. This is where, you mentioned a minute ago, why don't you just run DNA? Because until I actually got doing this show with you on a regular, I didn't realize that I thought, well, we all have DNA. Boom. There you go. Just pop it up there. And all of this exists. Not a problem, because that's what it seems like on TV. All we got to do is get DNA. There's the Wizard of Oz has the connection, and in reality,
that you ignore behind the curtain.
Yes. So what they did here was they actually went and did good old-fashioned police work, and they used some current technology like license plate readers. They seem to come in handy a good bit. And lo and behold, they find Christopher Blevins' vehicle, a green truck. They spot this green truck on license readers, and we got TV cameras everywhere. So the police, now that they have their suspect, and now that they have kind of a rough estimate as to when Laura went missing, they start looking, and they find that, wait a minute, they got a license plate reader picking up his green Dodge Ram truck, transporting a refrigerator-shaped object on 2 separate days late in July. And lo and behold, he leaves the state right after this little trek.
Yep.
Right after he's seen in 2 days carrying around something that looks like a refrigerator in his truck, he bolts town. He's gone. So
and I wonder if he had James Taylor's edition or rendition of Mexico playing on the radio as he goes down the road. Perfectly. Actually, I prefer Buffett's version of Mexico to James Taylor's, but that apparently is where he was headed for, Dave.
Yeah, and Joe, he was, I'm still a little flustered over the calendar that they found in his apartment, that had an X. It had all the calendar's marked with X's all the way up to July 24th, which is the day they believe he transported the refrigerator to the woods with her body in it. I mean, was he planning it out for a long time, and this is due date?
Yeah, I thought about that when you said, when you mentioned the X's, because I've, at work in particular, my old job, working at that, I'd put X's on my calendar all the time so I could count down when my next day off was going to be.
I just remember your wife writing down the number of days left before retirement, on her hand.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, Kim carries she's renowned for carrying an actual calendar with her. She's known as my little calendar girl. So, isn't that a Neil Sedaka song? No, I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway,
but all right. So they've got the calendar, they got it X'd out, but they actually have the video of him. And lo and behold, they start looking for him, and they find out, well, he has gone to Mexico, and he confesses to Mexican authorities that he got into a bar fight. That's his story. He was in a violent bar fight, and that's why he was fleeing. Well, I don't know exactly what happened. There's a little confusion here, but he was turning himself in. This is in late August. And when police are actually, when they find him, he is in San Diego and in jail. And again, it goes back to, he told police that he had been in some type of a bar fight and it led to a violent interaction with somebody. Granted, it's a lie. He killed his girlfriend at their home. He didn't get into a crazy bar fight, but he was telling a story. He was trying to get it off his chest, and telling somebody, I killed somebody, and that's actually where police found him, was in a state of semi-denial about killing his girlfriend, but admitting
I think the Mexican authorities did not hook him up because there was nothing in the system that came back to him.
Nope.
And I'm still unclear how the communication happens between the Mexican authorities and our authorities, but I do know that they're able to access this if there's an outstanding warrant, that sort of thing. And this is fascinating because, and I'll tell you, and Blevins is in fact arrested, okay, and he's got multiple charges on him,
right?
And this is still an unadjudicated case at this point. However, one of the big mysteries that remains with this case, remember how you mentioned just a second ago, Dave, that when they served that search warrant, they found a firearm at his house.
Correct.
Well, to me, if the cops say we've got a firearm and I don't have a cause of death that's been made public, I'm thinking, okay, well, we're talking about, she's been executed,
right,
or something to that effect. She's been shot. Okay. But we've got conflicting reports. You actually came across a statement that they thought that maybe she had been strangled, correct?
And that came from Blevins. That came from his original confession to Mexican authorities, where he strangled somebody in a bar fight, which again, we know it wasn't a bar fight. We know he was telling a lie while he was trying to tell the truth at the same time. By the way, they actually picked up his green truck, the one they saw the refrigerator size box.
It was a Dodge Ram, I think.
Yeah, green Dodge Ram truck. And they saw it crossing the border into Mexico on August the 2nd. And then on August, he goes into hiding in Mexico. August 27th in Mexico City, he then confesses to possibly killing somebody. But you mentioned the gun, and I think that is the actual telling tale. But based on the body's decomposition, Joe, what would a bullet wound tell you? Could you find enough evidence with regard to that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in this, if I had my druthers, I still don't know what a druther is, but if I had my druthers and it was my case, my preference would be to deal with a gunshot wound with a decomposed body any day over an asphyxial death, because it's so compromised, particularly this far downrange, Dave. We're talking months and months. That tissue in the neck in particular that you're going to be looking at, you might, maybe 3 months afterwards, 2 months afterwards, you really would have been able to appreciate focal areas of hemorrhage that are associated with the squeezing of the neck in some way. But dude, the further down the tracks you go with this, unless her hyoid is broken, it becomes more and more tough. If, for instance, she is shot, well, bullet defects hang around, because one of the things you're thinking about here is, particularly if it's a headshot, bone does not decompose like this. Okay, you're still going to be able to appreciate a bullet defect. You can appreciate directionality, front to back, left to right, above to below, below to above. You can appreciate all of those things. So trajectory issues. You might have trouble trying to determine range of fire because the skin, if it's in the scalp, the skin's compromised. Okay. But if she's shot in the chest, you could still do range of fire. You can see if it's up close, you could still possibly make out flecks of gunpowder in the clothing. Much remains to be written and seen about this case. And of course, it hasn't gone to trial yet, but we're going to keep our eye on it because it's certainly fascinating. And hopefully, Laura will receive some justice. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.